Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. My name is Hazel. I was born in a village unknown from the public and from which I had to flee following a disastrous incident in 2014. After years of going through ups and downs with wonderful foster parents, chaos then arose in early 2022 when I moved out to pursue my studies in another town. I settled in one of the many houses owned by the family before the week of nightmare began, Wednesday. Upon waking up on that winter morning, I found all the windows of the house open, but no trace of a break-in and nothing stolen. This happened for 2 consecutive nights, making me think that the house could be haunted by an unseen entity. Friday, whatever or whoever the culprit was, raised the bar, and I woke up to find all the windows closed. However, 2 identical drinking glasses were carefully placed on a cushion in the middle of the corridor. When I inspected the strange setup, I noticed that one of the glasses was cracked. The same day, I decided to purchase 3 cameras to get evidence of the strangeness occurring in the house. I managed to install one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and another one in the corridor with a good view of my bedroom door. Saturday. That morning, I woke up and found a chair from the dining table in front of my bed, as if someone watched me sleep all night long. I got out of the bedroom to everything else seeming normal until I went to the bathroom to get the greatest shock of my life. In the sink, I found all the 3 cameras destroyed, whereas on the mirror, ominous things had been written with my nail polish. Nice try, Hazel. What else? Before I and you. After fleeing the house, I phoned my Uncle Dane, a retired police officer in that same town, and he went to the house to investigate. Nothing made sense to him too, as there were no sign of anyone breaking into the residence. However, after I spent 2 days at his place, he displayed a strange confidence, reassuring me and encouraging me to return to the house, which I did on Tuesday evening and found the house clean and untouched. Wednesday, I opened my eyes, gasped, and almost jumped when I found Uncle Dane and my foster parents sitting next to the bed. Uncle Dane, Dad, Mom, but what? Hey, sweetie. We came as fast as we could when your uncle called us. Sweetie, we need to talk. My dad spoke as my mom began sobbing. What? What's going on? I asked. Hazel, I put a hidden camera in the living room after what you told me. What happened last night. I think. You just have to see for yourself, Uncle Dane said, handing me his phone. Beating harder than a drum, my heart filled up with fear as I launched the video. It did not have the best resolution, but I could still see the intruder emerge from the corridor as if she came from my bedroom. With a very masculine voice, she mumbled inaudible things, but stopped when she spotted the hidden camera in the corner of the living room. My heart sank, and my eyes widened when she approached to inspect the device. She was walking with her eyes closed, and of course it could not prevent anyone to recognize her. It was me. Story 2. So here I am, 24 years old, and I've just bought my first house. After a few years of jumping from apartments to moving in with friends, I finally had enough to buy my first house. It's nothing too special though. 1-story house with 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, decent sized living room and kitchen. The man who sold me this house was a little strange. He introduced himself as David. He didn't talk much, but the times he did, he kept his sentences short and straight to the point. He told me the previous owners lost a child in that house. I think she was around 16. 18 when she passed. This unsettled me a bit, but I figured everything would be fine. So I unpacked my things, and a few days later, I threw a housewarming party. I invited all of my family and friends. and told them they could all bring some people along. We were drinking, playing music, and I occasionally had to tell some of the younger guests off for using drugs. But all in all, it was a great party. I recognized almost everyone, but there was one girl who really caught my eye. She was sat in a chair in the corner of the room for pretty much the whole night. She never had a drink in her hand, never spoke to anyone, never really moved her head. She just sat perfectly still for the whole night. Anyway, time flew by and it was roughly 3 a.m. when all the guests had left. I was cleaning up and in the chair the girl was sitting in was a diary. There was no name or any noticeable cover. The only word on the front was "Dear Diary." I guess curiosity got the best of me because I stopped cleaning and took a seat to read through the book. I flipped to the first page and it read, "Dear Diary, Mom and Dad just brought me to this house. It's a lot smaller than my old home. The walls are falling apart and the floor is stained. I hate it here. I miss my old home, my friends, my school. I want to go home." I wondered if this could be the girl that passed away in the house a few years ago, but I kept flipping the pages either way. Dear Diary, it's been 2 months and I still hate it at this place. Mom and Dad have started arguing a lot. First it was about me missing school, but now they argue about silly things like Dad not taking the bins out on time. Poor girl, being forced to move away from her home, her friends, and all the memories she has there. And on top of that, her parents are now arguing. A few months later, I found a new job, made a load of new friends, and even started seeing this really cute girl. By now, I had forgotten all about the diary. I think I put it in one of the spare bedrooms in a closet somewhere, which is why, when I returned home from work and saw it sitting in the middle of the hall, I panicked. The guest room door was lying wide open, and the closet door was open too. I called the police reporting a break-in, and 2 officers showed up and looked around the place. Nothing was missing. Nothing was moved apart from the diary, and no one was found in the house. The officers left, and I hesitantly opened the diary. No new writing, no pages missing. It was the exact same as it was the last time I saw it. I flipped to the last page I read and continued reading. Dear Diary, I can't take it anymore. Mom and Dad have turned their aggression towards me. Dad even hit me the other day for being late home. They hate me. I hate me. I hate this house. I hate that school. I hate that school. I hate that school. I hate my life. This will be my last entry. For whoever might read this, Mom or Dad, I hate you. Whoever else, I'm sorry. And that was it. The rest of the pages were blank. I felt so bad for the girl. She was so young and her life turned to hell all because of this house. I put the diary back in the closet and decided to get ready for bed. I was awoken around 4 a.m. to a loud crash coming from the guest room. I found an old glass bottle and took it with me to see what made that noise. I slowly opened the door and on the bed was the diary. I searched the house, but again, nothing stolen. Nothing moved. No one to be seen. And so I picked up the diary and flipped the pages. Shivers ran down my spine as I noticed there was a new diary entry. Dear Diary, life is much more peaceful now. Mom and Dad sold the house and a new man moved in. I attended his party and had such a great time. No one came to speak to me, but that was okay. I prefer to be left alone. I'm sure we can be great friends, but I just don't know how to introduce myself to him. How is this possible? This has to be some joke. One of my friends might have found the diary. I know my best friend has a spare key, so many. He's just trying to freak me out. As I sat wondering what was going on, I thought I saw someone walking past the door towards the bathroom. I ran out as fast as I could, and as I turned into the hall, the bathroom door slammed shut. I shoved the door open, but there was no one there. I checked behind the shower curtain, but there was no one. I called the police again, and it was the same result. They warned me if I made a false call again, they would have to take action against me. I forced myself to forget about the situation. I put the diary in a box, put a padlock on it, and buried it outside in the backyard. A few days later, I was just sat on the sofa, watching a movie when I heard a woman's voice coming from one of the rooms. I paused the movie and the voice continued. I started walking towards the hall and the voice came to a stop. I searched the house and couldn't find anyone. The voice started once more as I sat back down. This time it was quite clearly coming from the guest room once again. So I marched towards the room and swung the door open. I almost fell to the ground when I saw a girl sitting on the edge of the bed with her back turned to me. She slowly turned her head, and I recognized her. She was the girl from my house warming party. She gave me a smile and turned her head back around to face the wall. I ran out of that house as fast as I could and didn't look back. I ran to my friend's place where he called the police for me. They searched the house and they said the only thing they found was a book. My heart skipped a beat when they handed me that diary. I've had enough of this. I put the house up for sale and started looking for a new place. Strange things kept happening during the following weeks. Things were moved. That cursed diary kept showing up at random places. I sold my house to a lovely elderly couple. I was about to tell them about the diary, but I kept it to myself. I found a new place about an hour's drive away. Moved in and everything was fine for a few months. I had just returned from visiting my girlfriend and right there on the table was a book. No cover, no writing. I slowly walked towards it and opened it up. All the pages were blank apart from the very last page. All it read, "Dear Diary, I'm back." Story 3. I'm a second-generation male who grew up in a maternal-dominated household, where whatever mom said, goes. She wasn't mean-spirited or anything. It was just that my dad was very passive in nature. I grew up with 3 older siblings, and when it was time for me to go to college, I wanted to get away as far away from home as possible. I got an engineering scholarship at the Baptist Bible University in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. I had lied left and right on my entrance applications regarding my faith, because I always viewed myself as an atheist. And if I was honest, I would never have gotten the scholarship, which saved me approximately $150,000 in tuition cost. Besides attaining the degree, the other best thing to come out of that school was meeting my now wife, Heather, where we ended up settling down in a small town in Wisconsin with a population of 350 people. My wife, Heather, has a very strong faith, and I guess I've been lying to her as well regarding my lack of faith. She's the oldest of 5 siblings, and myself be the youngest in my household, so our personalities seem to mesh well, where she naturally bosses me around. Heather found a small Baptist church in our small town, where we go every Sunday. The church is painted white, where there are about 60 other parishioners, and was built in the 1890s. The pastor is in his early 50s and has his own college-age children. I really dread going to church, but I jokingly say to myself that it came along with picking an attractive girlfriend in college. Slightly less boring is my engineering job at the local steel company, where I will never get rich, but at least it has good medical benefits. With both of us being settled in this small town, we were starting to get bored. So Heather made some type of Bible reference that we should be having our own kids, and we've been trying to conceive for what seems like over a year now. I knew we are young, so Heather not being able to get pregnant didn't bother me much, but Heather working at the church-affiliated daycare, Preschool seemed to constantly remind her of us potentially never being able to have kids. The local area's population really swells during the growing season, because of all the migrant workers and their families who flood the area. Our church offers preschool to the migrant families at a really cheap price, so Heather is kept really busy. Heather would meet with Pastor Phil after her preschool job with the hope that prayers would help us with our first baby. I too have to read way too much of that Bible to help soothe Heather, because she thinks that reading scriptures will somehow help her get pregnant faster. Then, as Heather managed to bite away all of her fingernails over the last few months from the stress of not being able to conceive, then at last we finally got the good news we were waiting for, when she woke up one morning and got a positive home pregnancy test. I couldn't be any happier, as I was going to throw that damn Bible out the window. Heather continued working at the preschool and was even helping Pastor Phil at the church when I had to work later than usual at the steel company. About 6 months into the pregnancy, I started noticing that I was having slight pain below my stomach that was relieved only after I would urinate. I contributed my symptoms to the pregnancy and how I heard that new fathers often gained 50 pounds from the stress of having their first kid. So I just basically ignored the symptoms. After 9 months and 1 week, Heather finally went into labor, and we were both pleasantly surprised that we had a girl, which we named Grace. After 2 days at the hospital, we took her home to our 1-level, 2-bedroom ranch home. We had the crib and everything else we needed, all ready for the baby. Heather continued to work at the preschool and brought our baby, Grace as well. After 3 months, everything was going well, where Grace was healthy and Heather was happy. But I still had the persistent issue of the slight pain that was relieved only after urinating. So I decided to go to the urologist, where I discovered that I had a form of benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BP, where a sleuth of tests were done. And the urologist said I had non-functional tests that produced 0 sperm. My first response to the urologist was, "You know I have a daughter." The urologist responded, "You have a congenital condition, meaning since birth you were never going to be able to have children because of your non-functional testes." I was number 12 out of 30 patients this doctor was probably going to see today. So he gave me the half-hearted, "If there's anything I could do for you, please let the nurse know." I walked out of the doctor's office a completely defeated person because I had built up such a strong bond with Grace. I drove to a field and called my father, who said he was aware of my issue and they used to sneak me testosterone hormones as a kid because my parents never wanted me to feel weird about myself. "What about Grace?" I said to my dad. "We are so happy that you were able to pull off that miracle," my dad replied. My father doesn't have it in him to hurt a fly, but I wasn't that naive. Just about anyone in town could be the father, from one of the Ukrainian migrant workers to a father at the preschool to Pastor Phil to even one of the South American migrant workers, which could also be a possibility. So I looked online at Quora and Reddit to see if any other guy had ever had the same issue, and not surprising with the hundreds of millions of people in this world, I found someone whose advice was you weren't going to be able to have your own kids anyways. So what's the difference if she went to the sperm bank or had sex with some John Doe? I figured there was truth in that advice, where I would never be able to give Heather a baby or any other woman. So it'll be best if I just kept my mouth shut and just go along with the flow like my dad always did. So I went home with my steroid medication for the BP and told Heather everything was fine and hugged Grace because she is my daughter. Though I have dark brown hair now. Grace has blonde hair just like I did growing up. Stupid me didn't realize that Heather has blonde hair, however. I never had a reason to doubt that she wasn't my daughter. Regardless, I had to accept that she wasn't mine biologically and move on. I quickly snapped out of my funk and was just happy to have a family. A few days later, I was starting to feel nauseated, pretty much every day and all day long. I called the urologist, and he said it wasn't from the BP and was probably stress related. I did find it extremely degrading going to church every Sunday and looking at Pastor Phil, where I would be picturing him and Heather praying a lot with the hopes of helping Heather get pregnant. It just seemed like the nausea was making my everyday decision, making more and more difficult to the point where I got reprimanded at work for poor work performance. Then when Grace was about 27 weeks old, Heather called and asked me to pick up Grace from the preschool because Grace wasn't feeling well. I was still feeling nauseous myself, but it was the preschool's policy that sick kids had to leave. So I went ahead and picked Grace up. I got to the preschool and exchanged pleasantries with Heather. Then I carried Grace to the car and strapped her into the car seat. About 2 minutes into the drive, I looked in the rearview mirror at Grace and, for some reason, she just looked off. She still had blonde hair, but even her hair seemed brighter than usual, and her facial features were just off. It was kind of like seeing one of those knockoff man dolls or poorly drawn Mickey Mouses where you could look at it and say, okay, that kind of looks like a He-Man or a Mickey Mouse, but it's not the real thing. I know I've been feeling awful lately, and perhaps my judgment was cloudy, but I just couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror. But I had to tell myself that Heather was the one who handed me Grace, and I better pull myself together before I get committed to a mental hospital. When I got home, I looked over pictures of Grace and the Grace that I had brought home, and I just felt more and more nauseous. It's difficult because babies' appearances change week to week, and I feel like complete crap for thinking this way. But half of my brain was saying this is not your baby, and the other half was saying she has blonde hair, as she did when she was born, and Heather handed her to you. So why wouldn't this be your daughter? I put Grace in her crib because she looked tired, and I sat on the couch, waiting for Heather to get home, just so she could eyeball Grace and I could get some affirmation that baby was actually Grace. After a couple of hours of me sitting on the couch with my stomach turning in knots, Heather came home. Thankfully, she went right to the nursery without me saying, "Can you check and make sure that's the real Grace in the crib?" Heather came out of the nursery holding a half-sleeping Grace. And I guess it was just all in my paranoid head, as Heather didn't have any reservations about this baby not being ours. The days went on, and my stomach issues had actually got much better. Heather was promoted to the manager of the preschool, and I think we were the only family who drove a Tesla in a 100-mile radius of our town. Heather had a knack with money, and she was in charge of all of our bills. I thought that she must be doing something right because we were getting takeout, food more than we were cooking, and we were planning some really nice vacations on top of building a new home. Heather sprung the question on me if I wanted another child, and I just played along with the charade and said, sure, why not? I knew I had zero outcome in this conception process, so I was just going to bury my head in the sand and let her do whatever kept her happy, because I couldn't give her what she needed anyways. And the end result was that my name was going to be on the birth certificates, and I'm the father, and that's all that matters to me. With my fingers crossed, this conception was much faster, which made me question if she wasn't already pregnant before she even asked me my opinion on the pregnancy in the first place. Regardless, it didn't matter because outside of trying to conceive a child, I had no other suspicions that she was sleeping around outside of our marriage. The weeks went on and Grace was getting bigger, and Heather was growing more pregnant. Grace eventually started to walk, and her hair and skin has gotten much darker. So I almost want to eliminate Pastor Phil as being her biological father, because the guy has very light blonde hair mixed with white streaks. 9 months later, and our second daughter Abigail was born, who is almost an exact replica of Grace when she was born. Because I'm human, I almost played a game of Clue in my head where I tried to figure out who done it, meaning who's the actual biological father of Abigail. But this time it was more humorous to me versus causing me anger. It was really like having Grace all over again with Abigail. So I was convinced they both have the same biological father. Heather is 100 Irish with blonde hair and pale skin, which mirrors Abigail. And when Grace was more of a younger infant, so I'm guessing that Grace's father's genetics started to kick in as Grace got older, just when we were taking our expensive trips to Disney World and enjoying our new home. Then my unbearable stomach issues had come back with a vengeance. I hadn't had these stomach pains and nausea in well over a year. It got so bad that I had stayed home from work for a few days. When Heather got home from her preschool job, she was carrying Abigail, who is 5 months now, and Grace came in running through the door. Heather asked me how I was feeling, then told me how hectic the preschool was with the migrant children. I was half out of it with my stomach pains, but she handed me Abigail anyways, where I immediately said, "What the fuck?" "Excuse me," Heather replied. "This isn't Abigail. What the fuck is going on?" "This is the same thing I saw about a year and a half ago with Grace," I responded. Heather looked at me with the most angry eyes and said, "Zach, this is your daughter. I know you're not feeling well, but you're making me feel real uncomfortable by what you are saying." I looked at the baby's hair and I said this baby has black-haired roots where I could still smell the bleach. "Look at this baby's shirt. You could see where the bleach leached out the red from the shirt." Even though my stomach was hurting, My adrenaline was rushing, and I pulled up her shirt, and I said, "Heather, this baby doesn't even have a birthmark on her back," like Abigail did. Heather's facial expressions quickly changed to where she said, "I can explain." "Explain what?" "Where is Abigail? Did you do the same thing to Grace?" I said. My stomach pain kicked in again, and I fell back onto the couch. Heather said, "I'll go get Abigail." Then she left the house with both the Abigail and probable Grace imposters home with me. I immediately called 911, and I really didn't know what to tell the dispatcher, especially because I was in so much pain. But I reiterated for them to go to the preschool because something horrible might have happened to Abigail, and I told them about Grace as well. I was in so much pain that I actually passed out on the couch. Fortunately, the police came to my house because of the 2 young kids, and I was brought to the emergency department. The doctor told me that I was being intentionally poisoned with antifreeze unknowingly by someone for probably days based on my symptoms. I surmised that Heather did this to distract me with the bait and switch with the babies that worked with Grace. But she got caught with Abigail. Because there were so many layers to this case, the FBI got involved. The FBI hasn't been able to track down Heather, and they have no idea of her whereabouts. The fake Abigail was determined to be a migrant mother's baby, where the mother contracted tuberculosis and gave the baby to our Baptist church for an illegal adoption. In turn, Heather kept the baby and, as I suspected, tried to trick me by dyeing her hair blonde. I wish the FBI agent would have just shot me in the head versus what she told me next. Her name was Agent Brodsky, and she put her hand on my right shoulder and said, "Zach, this is going to be really difficult for you to understand, but based on looking at your bank accounts, we suspect that Heather sold her own babies to probably the highest bidder for nothing more than greed and money." I started crying hysterically because I had built up such a bond with the actual Grace and Abigail. I just couldn't believe I married such a monster. All she wanted was that Tesla and whatever else money could buy. Agent Brodsky told me people pay a ton of money for young blonde hair girls, and there's no way of telling what the highest bidder's motives were for wanting my girls. But assume the worst, because no saint is going to partake in illegal deals like these that involve my daughters. After she told me that, I just wanted to burn this house down, and anything else associated with the money Heather used to purchase with the sale. I called my father and told him about everything, and once again, I should have just had a noose available when my father said, "Yeah, your mother told Heather when you guys were first dating about your testicular issues. I'm amazed your mother never told you. I think you're the only one that doesn't know with your mother's mouth." I really looked around for any sharp objects in this godforsaken house, because that meant Heather intentionally had chosen me years ago, thinking I wouldn't care about her bait, and switch with the kids knowing they weren't going to be mine, or perhaps that I would be dumb enough to fall for it, and perhaps for Grace's bait and switch. I did fall for her scheme. I mocked myself and said I guess I fooled her as I put my newly prescribed antidepressants in my mouth, to include Lexapro. The silver lining is that the courts have no idea who the fake Grace really is or who her parents are, and because I'm the only father she knows, I got to keep her. I offered to keep the fake Abigail as well, but that's probably not going to happen, and she will likely be returned to Guatemala. I spend my days now searching for the real Grace and Abigail. Every so often, I'll see a child that resembles one or both of them, and I have no idea if the kids I see were purchased. The FBI kept Heather's DNA on file in case the real Abigail or Grace were ever returned. The FBI also suspects that other children were bought and sold through the preschool, and the FBI is still trying to determine Pastor Phil's involvement, if there was any at all.